Today we're talking about the throat chakra. So I took a day off yesterday. I was tired and I didn't really feel like going live. So I figured I would wait. So today, here we are. We're going to talk about day 5 of 7. We're going to talk about the throat chakra today. We're moving our way up into the upper chakras, or what are sometimes referred to as the spirit chakras. The lower chakras that we've covered thus far, the root chakra, the sacral chakra, and the solar plexus chakra are all considered earthbound, or the lower chakras of our body. We moved into the heart. We talked about the heart chakra the other day, which is kind of the bridge between the body and spirit. So today we're going to talk about the first chakra in the upper or spirit chakra is called the throat chakra. And the throat chakra is responsible for communication and truth and integrity. So we're going to have a fun time discussing that today. Give this a little refresh. If you're in the room, let me know you're here. I didn't tell anybody I was coming out today at 4 o'clock. Slipped my mind, too much Spanish homework and exercising today, so I just jumped on. So if you're here, let me know. I'll give it another half a minute, and then I'm going to jump into Awakening Soul Force, a practical guide to awakening the truth within, available at Barnes & Nobles and Amazon. Look it up. Look me up, Jeff Bomberger, and you will find the book. Hey, Tessa. Welcome. Glad to see you here again. Hopefully you've caught up on the solar plexus and heart chakras before this discussion today. So let's get into today's discussion. I casually joked earlier that I was wearing a cool, soothing, calming blue shirt, and this is connected to the throat chakra energy. So I thought, hey, I should wear a blue shirt. We're talking about the throat chakra. This is our energy center that's connected to communication, listening, our ability to learn, to receive guidance, but it's also connected to truth and alignment and spiritual integrity. So we're going to read out of the book today the chapter on the throat chakra, do a little discussion back and forth for any questions that come up for those who might tune in. And then at the end, we'll do a brief discussion about the deconditioning thought experiments. Hi, Kiara. Oh, I'm sure the time difference makes it tough, but thank you for making it on today. Hopefully you'll be able to join us for today's talk. It'll maybe last about a half hour, 45 minutes. Seems to be the length they're going. So let's go ahead and dive in, all right? We're diving into the 5th chakra of the system, called the throat chakra, located a key right there. Okay, how many of us have a hard time trusting politicians? I've worked with many, and there's only one that I actually trust that I've worked with so far. There are other ones, but anyhow, I digress. How many of us have a hard time trusting politicians? Why is it that they so often don't resonate as real and authentic? In my opinion, it is because so many times what they say and do can be contradictory. Sometimes the word they say in a single sentence are contradictory in and of themselves. When we feel this from someone, we're feeling the lack of alignment and the energy imbalance present in their throat chakra and the way that it interacts with ours. If our throat chakra is out of balance, we may be susceptible to falling for doublespeak because the throat chakra is also connected to listening. If we tune up our throat chakra, we will not only be better at speaking our own truth, but we'll be able to detect when someone else is being disingenuous. This energy center is all about alignment and integrity. Basically, our BS meter goes up real high when we get our throat chakra tuned up. The one thing I will say, though, I use the example of politicians because almost by the nature of the job, you have to not say everything. And that's the one thing I learned working in politics is you do have to be careful about how you use your words and what you say, because you're going to get criticized for it by everybody. Somewhere is not going to like what you're saying. So I understand it because I'm working on the communication side of things in politics. I understand you're kind of walking through this landmine of emotional reactivity that is present when it comes to doing that job. So I understand it a lot more. I have a very empathetic and humanized view of our political process. But that being said, our BS meter increases as Tessa's tapping into, gets better. It gets stronger when we tune up the throat chakra. because it's connected to spiritual integrity and alignment. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So let's talk about the color. We've already talked about this, but the color is blue, turquoise, and the throat chakra is located just above the clavicle at the base of the neck here. So that is where the throat chakra is located when you're doing your meditation or focusing on it, doing any healing work on it. What it is, our throat chakra is connected to the qualities of communication, inspired creativity, truth, and integrity. It's where we speak both the truth and our truth and stand up for what we believe in. The throat chakra also allows us to listen deeply and is connected to teaching. Most importantly, the throat chakra is connected to spiritual integrity and telling the truth. Physically, this energy center is connected to our throat, ears, mouth, upper chest, shoulders, and neck. So some of you who have followed along when I do the live readings, you might hear me say, oh, I'm feeling a pain or a block in my neck here. And then when I investigate that more, that's usually a sign to me that we're talking about throat chakra related. Now, different parts of the body and different spots on my body, to me, kind of point as like a map to what I'm going to investigate or what I'm probably honing in on when I'm reading for someone. And we also talk about the throat, the ears, the mouth, the upper chest, shoulders, and neck as in terms of their physical connectedness to the center, because as we've discussed, we are energetic beings, and energy manifests itself from what we'll call the highest vibrating frequencies, which are, quote, immaterial, the things that we can't really see or touch or measure with scientific instruments, right? Kind of like we can measure radio waves, but I can't see a Wi-Fi signal. I can't see a radio wave, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So as energetic beings, we kind of have qualities and dimensions of ourselves that exist all the way from those aspects of self that cannot be seen, touched, or felt or measured directly like a physical thing, all the way up to like gross physical material bodies. So when there are issues in the throat chakra, we may find ourselves having pain or discomfort or issues related to the throat, the ears, the mouth, the upper chest, the neck, and the shoulders. These are manifestations of a disruption somewhere in the chain of command, whether it's a physical thing, whether it's thoughts, whether it's emotions, whether it is unexpressed things, because we're talking about the throat chakra, so a lot of it's about our voice, or if it's something happening at the energetic level. So just something to keep in mind. So let's talk about what it looks like when your throat chakra is in balance. This is the ideal. This is what we're working towards. This is what balance and harmony in this center achieves for us. When the throat chakra is in balance, we are able to communicate our heart and our ideals clearly, peacefully, and honestly. Our thoughts, desires, and feelings are expressed authentically and truthfully. Talking the talk, walking the walk, and walking the talk all speak to the integrity of a well-calibrated throat chakra. A good sense of humor, timing, and charisma can all radiate from balance in this energy center. Alignment in the throat chakra also makes us great listeners, which means we not only hear what is being said clearly, but we also hear what is not being said by others. We're able to listen with our other senses, including our, quote, sixth sense or intuition. We're present and open to what others are trying to say, yet we exercise sound judgment and are more discerning about what we hear. This chakra also governs teaching and listening. Teaching and learning. All right. Tessa says, I'm feeling the neck at the moment. I'm excited. Oh, yeah. So this will be a good one for you to check in on today. Oh, it looks like my transmitter is about to lose some battery. So I'm going to pause for just 1 second, switch the battery out, and I'll be right back. Un momento. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I have retrieved the necessary batteries to inject energy back into my microphone. Where were we? Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Tessa says, I love teaching, listening, and learning. Yeah, that means we're in a throat chakra cycle. One of the things that's really good that I'm working on right now that's good for your throat chakra is learning a new language. I know Cheryl, who's in here often, is learning multiple languages, but being able to learn a new language is really, really good for bringing energy into this throat chakra. And we're going to talk about that when it comes to generating positive energy in this energy center. So just a quick recap, signs of balance. We're great listeners. We're able to speak our truth peacefully, thoughtfully, and honestly. We're articulate, so we don't have an issue speaking up or saying what's on our heart, what's on our mind. And we're great listeners in that we hear what's being said, but we also can hear what's not being said. The one thing I want to say about that is there's a difference between listening with our intuition and listening with our ego and projecting, because there's a little bit of there's a difference. Listening with the ego and projecting is taking the information that we're hearing and reading into it, or creating a story or a narrative with the bits and pieces of information that we're hearing and creating another narrative. We're filling in the blanks, so to speak. That's not necessarily listening with the throat chakra or with a balanced throat chakra or our intuition. Listening with our intuition means getting into the essence of what somebody is saying. Sometimes we have a hard time articulating ourselves. Sometimes we might have a hard time asking for what we need, or we might have a hard time saying what we really mean because we're afraid it's going to hurt somebody's feelings or something like that. So being able to hear what's not being said is moving into a space of what's this person trying to say in essence, and where can I kind of hold space for them to feel more safe, to open up about what's going on, or where can I just trust this knowing? You might have a friend that says, you hear their voice on the phone, and they say, "Oh, I'm not doing well." And you could take that one of two ways. One, you could spin a story about what that means, or if you might have, maybe you what you feel intuitive is like, "Oh man, they're really sad." It's not that they're physically not well; they're really sad. And so maybe you ask, "Hey, is there anything that you want to talk about?" And then all of a sudden you've created the space for them to say more in a safe way, right? You haven't jumped to any conclusions. You just asked a simple question, kind of trusted that there was more to that statement. There was more under the iceberg. And instead of making assumptions, you asked for clarity, essentially, or give them the space to express more clarity. So there's a difference between listening with our intuition deeply and projecting, and this is something that I've run into working with people, especially on camera. Very often I work with folks who are, I've worked with several nonprofits, several political campaigns in my time, and people who are doing like pitch videos or some sort of like a fundraising video for an invention or a new project or something like that. And so sometimes you're listening to somebody and they're saying a bunch of stuff, but it's taking a lot of words and having a hard time getting there. And you know that you just need like a 5-second soundbite. So you say, "Oh, you mean you're saying this?" And they're like, "Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about." That's also an example of deep listening, and that comes when we've really tuned into our throat chakra. So let's talk about causes for imbalance. So that's what it looks like if it's imbalance. We speak with integrity. We speak what's on our hearts and minds in a kind and a peaceful and an honest way. And we're able to deeply listen to others. So that's the ideal. So what causes imbalances in the throat chakra? And as I go through these, check in with any of these things that might resonate for you and see if there's something to look at further. Growing up in a strict household with oppressive or restrictive parents can block throat chakra energy if we're forced to, quote, swallow our words. Living under politically oppressive or authoritarian regimes can also dramatically affect our ability to speak our truth. Not being able to express anger, living with abuse, or being subjected to verbally or physically abusive environments are also common reasons we may withhold what we want to say or the truth of who we are out of fear of a backlash. Embellishing facts or telling lies can also cause an imbalance in the throat chakra as this erodes our integrity. The first stuff we're talking about, not that shocking, right? If someone literally is suppressing your voice and saying, no, you can't say those things, don't talk, don't speak, I don't want to hear you, children are best seen, not heard. If that's the philosophy that you grew up under, then of course you're going to have a hard time speaking up for yourself, regardless of what it is. That can be we can have a hard time with that. That requires, some deep healing, some real deep inner looking, and becoming more and more comfortable with just expressing what's on our mind. And a lot of times there's a bridge, when we start to do that, it is hard. It takes time to get comfortable saying what's on our heart and mind. And it takes time to step into that. And so you want to find spaces where you can practice this in a safe way and in a space where you're not going to be judged. Because it just takes practice to strengthen this muscle, so to speak, especially if it's weak because we lived in a household or in an environment where we weren't allowed to talk or our opinion didn't matter. And it doesn't mean that your opinion is factual just because you have it, but just getting comfortable speaking up and saying what's on your mind is an important thing. Then, we can work towards the integrity in this chakra center where we're speaking the truth. We're speaking something that is objectively true or real or true to your experience. And that's where the embellishing facts or telling lies can cause an imbalance in the throat chakra. So this is something that I think is really common and probably more pervasive than most people would maybe acknowledge or admit. But if we boil it down to just like one word, it's gossip. Gossiping is very destructive. Gossiping is very, very destabilizing to the throat chakra center. And part of the reason is that it's not a truthful way of communicating, because gossiping, about people behind their backs, are not a direct communication with them. So like really judging on somebody and trashing someone or talking about, oh, did you see so-and-so, what they did with this person? And oh my gosh, can you believe that's happening? And oh my God, all the drama, like the reality TV drama that we make out of other people's lives is really destabilizing to the throat chakra center. Because we're saying something that we wouldn't say to the person's face or to a person's face, then we're out of alignment. We're not truthful. We're not necessarily being honest. So we have to make a choice then. Do I just not make those kinds of comments? Or if I'm not going to say that to somebody's face, then I probably shouldn't say it behind someone's back either, because that creates a weird imbalance in this center, especially as it relates to that subject matter. The other thing is what I was talking about earlier, projecting or making stories or crafting narratives that don't exist. This is also why we see it in the media. We see it with politicians. We see it in People magazine or in tabloid magazines. Taking tidbits of information and spinning them into an entire story is fundamentally dishonest. It's fundamentally out of alignment. Embellishing facts, creating stories out of something that maybe isn't necessarily true. It could be suggested or implied. These are all like very common things that we do, but these are also very common things that pull us out of spiritual integrity. It also pulls our throat chakra out of alignment because we're not necessarily being truthful, right? We kind of have an obligation to our spiritual integrity and to the alignment in this center to speak what we know. Hey, Allie, how's it going? To speak what we know is true. And that may seem like if we start to check in that way and say, oh, well, that's a lot. Well, then like, what am I allowed to talk about? Well, that's actually a pretty good reflection, to take part in. That's a nice question to ask yourself, because if we haven't had a direct experience with something, then what we've picked up is pretty much secondhand knowledge. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't infer things, or that we can't try and put pieces together, but we can't necessarily put it all together and speak it as lived, like grounded, real truth. Because if we didn't have a direct perception of an event or a thing, we kind of have to suspend our judgments to a certain degree, you know? So that's something that's really important for this energy center, because it deals with truth and alignment. It's a good idea that we become comfortable admitting when we don't know things, admitting when we've reached the end of our knowledge or experience on a subject matter or a person, or whatever. It's a good, healthy thing to be humble in understanding the boundaries of our knowledge, because when we speak to something, it's one of the things that made me so, I was really reluctant to write a book, to start a group and talk about these things, especially spiritually, because one, I know that not everybody has my experiences. I know that everybody's not me. So what can I really talk about? Well, I can talk about my journey and the wisdom and the experiences that I've had. I can speak to those things very honestly and authentically and truthfully. I can say, in my experience, from my point of view, X, Y, Z, this has been my experience, but that doesn't make it absolute truth, right? So that was something I had to overcome and get over. And I think it was a healthy thing for me. You know, it puts me in check. When you're asked, when you're called to sort of share stuff or to teach in some way, I think it's important to keep your ego in check as much as you possibly can. And that's not always easy, but I think in the case, like I said, like in this case for me, I was like, okay, well, how am I supposed to talk about these things that seem to have an impact on everybody's life, but may not be exactly someone else's cookie cutter experience? Oh, well, I'm just going to speak to what I've learned and my experiences and try not to venture outside of those things. Because at that point, I'm hypothesizing, you know? And that's okay too. It's okay to hypothesize, but you know, if we become convicted in our hypothesis, in our philosophical musings, if there are strong convictions behind those, well, that might put us out of alignment, because there might not be the foundation there to have a sturdy conviction, because there's just no knowledge, there's no experience, there's no actual reality to it, other than it being just a philosophical musing or something that we've created in our mind. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So those are things that might cause an imbalance. Embellishing facts or telling lies, definitely true. Being in a household or something that you were not allowed to talk, that could definitely squash your voice. How do we know when this chakra is out of balance? When our throat chakra is out of balance, it can physically manifest as having difficulty communicating. This could appear as a speech-related issue, such as stuttering, losing one's voice, or a raspy, timid voice. Other problems in the throat region include coughing and laryngitis. This could also indicate issue in this chakra. Pain and issues in the mouth, such as toothaches, mouth ulcers, cold sores, or swollen or bleeding gums, are other physical symptoms that may call us to work with this energy. Complications in the sinuses, like allergies, stuffy nose, sinus infections, and pain or stiffness in the jaw, neck, and upper shoulders may also require throat chakra balancing. When we are lacking sufficient energy in the throat chakra, we experience problems communicating and have difficulty voicing our thoughts, feelings, and opinions. We may have a literal fear of speaking and have a hard time speaking up for ourselves. When our throat chakra is underactive, we may not trust our intuition and our inner voice, and will therefore have a hard time being honest with ourselves and others. Sometimes an imbalance in this center can lead to our being manipulative and deceptive with our words and not speaking or living our truth. Blocked creativity and self-expression can also be an indicator that we need to bring more energy into the throat chakra. When we have overactivity in the throat chakra, so there's like all kinds of energy in this center, we may find ourselves talking too much, talking too fast, and leaving little room to listen. Excessive energy in this chakra might manifest as our speaking negatively about others, aggressively asserting our opinions, or being verbally abusive, domineering, or being verbally domineering or even abusive. Gossiping, condescension, and interrupting others can be signs we need to get to ground some of this energy from the throat chakra. Getting on our soapbox, being preachy, dogmatic, and self-righteous are also signs we need to bring this energy center into balance. So those are some of the things we might see if our throat chakra is out of balance. I'd be curious if any of those resonate for you. And I'll be honest, as a young activist, when I first got involved in activism, I was all over this. Being preachy, getting on a soapbox, being dogmatic, being self-righteous. Yeah, man. You better believe it. And I had to acknowledge and be honest with myself at a certain point and go, ooh, I don't know if that's a good look. You know, some people might think it's cool or interesting, or, you know, oh, you're like a warrior, like that's great, whatever. But I had to realize that was some BS ego stuff, you know? I had to be honest with myself when it came to that. Understanding kind of these signs and symptoms, as I'm talking about in the book here, were things that helped me bring it into balance. You guys got some questions and comments. Let's see what's up. Tessa says, saying I don't know is showing you are human or real people. Totally, 100% agree with that. Kara says, totally agree, Tessa. People will feel comfortable being open and vulnerable back. Totally. Being open and vulnerable about ourselves allows others to be open to listening as well. I think that's a very important space to hold for others and ourselves. You know, it's just you be what you want. You would like others to be back to you. So hold that space for others, and there's a better chance they're going to hold that space for you. Tessa says, I can see myself in different situations. I have been all of those things, right? Kara says, I made all those mistakes as a younger person, right? Allie, you can grab the book on Amazon by searching Awakening Soul Force, The Practical Guide to Awakening the Truth Within. You can also find it on Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble is kinder to us as authors. Amazon takes a bigger chunk, but that's totally okay. It's all about getting the information and the material out there. Do whatever's easiest and what can get it delivered to you. Yeah, so Kiara's, offers up a pretty honest reflection, kind of like I was talking about too. It's like we can get soapboxy, we can gossip, we can condescend, and it's not to say you're a bad person if you do these things. It's not to say you're a horrible person, you're judgmental and all those things. Like, it's part of our culture. Like, it's part of what we do. It's part of how we can connect and communicate. Just because that's what we've learned in our social circles to a certain degree. Some people more or less than others, depending on what your family and friends are like. But at the end of the day, gossiping, condescending, speaking over people, we've seen this become a thing. It's come to our awareness, like the mansplaining thing, dudes getting up and interrupting women and talking over them and those are signs of an imbalance in our throat chakra, right? Talking too fast, interrupting people, again, getting on the soapbox, being preachy, dogmatic. That means you got a lot of energy in that chakra. It needs to be grounded a little bit. So the great thing about understanding the sort of signs and symptoms of where we're at in our throat chakra, we can determine whether we need to charge it up a little or if we need to ground it a little bit more. And for me, especially someone who still is very much kind of a political animal, is that I enjoy, I don't like politics. I like government, and I'm interested in government and how we kind of make society as a group, how we collaborate to do that. One of the things that is most just depressing about the whole process to me is this part, is that the throat chakra, if we were going to make an auric, sort of outline of our political system or whatever, the throat chakra would be incredibly out of whack. Try to get into a conversation about politics without being condescending, without gossiping, without embellishing facts or making them up. This is a tough thing for us to get ourselves wrapped, get our mind wrapped around, get our throat adjusted to. But at a certain point, I made the decision, and this was even after having a lot of experience firsthand in politics, is you really got to reserve your assumptions and judgments for. You just have to reserve them, because everybody's telling you a story, and the best story is in policy and in votes, Everything else is stories, is rhetoric, and parsing through that can be a challenging thing, but you can do it. And the best way, it's kind of like what I came to when I decided, how am I going to speak about these matters? How am I going to speak about these spiritual ideas that I want to share? Well, what's my experience? what has been my personal experience? And it's not to say that just because I had a personal experience doesn't mean that someone else can't have one outside of that. It does ground it though in a semblance of reality. And so grounding our communication in direct experience and what we can put our hands on adds a level of integrity to what we're saying. You know, we're not just parroting things. We're not just copying, talking points or rhetoric. Same thing when we're gossiping about other people. This is something that really pulls us out of alignment. I'm very uncomfortable when people start to trash talk other people. Like gossip to me always makes me feel really uncomfortable. And the closer it gets to like my home and family, like the more awkward and creepy and weird it feels. It's easier to gossip around bigger things because there's like there's more distance between us and that thing, that object or that person. So, you know, celebrity, like those trash celebrity magazines that people love, like not super healthy in my opinion. And it's easier to engage in that because you don't really know. You don't know these people. They're just, you see what's in the paper or on the screen and that's it. It's a big old fat illusion. And it's easy to make stuff up about it. And I don't think that's necessarily healthy, me personally. So some mantras to bring this into balance, to bring our throat chakra into balance. Again, it's not only about how we speak, but it's how we listen, what we listen to, how deeply we can listen in a clear and intuitive way. I hear the truth. I speak the truth. I live the truth. I live the truth. Another example is I worked for someone who is, by all society standards, a very, I'm going to say renowned or famous teacher. And this person I found in my interaction to be super verbally abusive. And that was an interesting discovery for me because it was completely opposite to the values and vision that were being offered up. So again, this goes into spiritual alignment. When somebody is walking the walk, talking the talk, and walking the talk, talking the walk, getting all of it figured out. There's misalignment when our actions and our words don't match. When someone else's actions and words don't match, there's misalignment. It doesn't make them good. It doesn't make them bad. It doesn't make them sinister. It doesn't make them evil. It just makes them not in alignment. On the other hand, there are people that do what we might consider to be pretty terrible things who are in alignment because in thought, word, and deed, they actually believe what they are doing. So that's another thing. Sometimes people who are in alignment can resonate as authentic, even if they're maybe doing things that are destructive or coarse or calloused or from an angry or a darker place. But they sometimes might resonate as more honest because they are what they are. They actually think what they think, they believe what they believe, they say what they say, and they act based on all of those things. So there's a lot to be said for being in alignment. And for our purposes here in this group, and for what my spiritual journey has been, is I wanted to align myself with love and peace and freedom and wisdom and compassion and mercy and forgiveness. So can I align with those things? Those are lofty ideals and fall short of them plenty. But that's like what I'm working towards. And so when I check in with myself in this center, this energy center, I'm saying, am I speaking what I believe is my highest truth? Am I doing what I believe is in alignment with my highest ideals and visions? Is this grounded in a peaceful motivation? Is this grounded in a compassionate intention? So some things to think about when we think about our own alignment. I hear the truth, I speak the truth, I live the truth. Those are some mantras to bring this energy center into balance. Generating positive energy. So we need to charge this energy center up. If we wanted to bring it into alignment, here are some things to consider. Finding a safe, non-judgmental, and comfortable space to speak your truth and use your voice can be a great practice for bringing new, positive energy into your throat chakra. Join a speech and debate club. Try Toastmasters. Give stand-up comedy or improv a whirl. Express yourself through writing, music, poetry, or art. Face your fear of speaking up in places where it is safe to do so. Use your physical voice by singing, chanting, or toning. This can also bring back balance into the throat chakra. So can listening to music we really enjoy. This center is also connected to teaching. So mentoring someone, sharing knowledge, can strengthen our throat chakra. Our heart chakra and our throat chakra are also very closely linked. So it is important that we are able to live and speak what is in our heart. Spiritual integrity is of the utmost importance to realizing our soul force and living our ideals. Therefore, practicing what we preach is vital to bringing energy into balance in this center. When our heart energy is aligned with our throat energy, we move through the world with a great degree of integrity, which is vital to empowering our soul force. So there you have it. A bunch of ideas for how we can bring energy into this energy center, how we can charge it up. So like I was mentioning earlier, without being too, unkind or judgmental of ourselves, we have to recognize that when a chakra is out of balance, the work to get it in balance means we're probably going to have to cross some bridges. And so whether it's you or a person around you, it's really important to not be judgmental of yourself from where you're at, or judgmental of another person and where they're at as they grow, right? Because if you are someone who is having a hard time speaking your truth, like maybe you have some ideas or beliefs or a perspective, on whatever it is, but you can't give voice to it. Joining a safe space to kind of play and use your voice, like I mentioned comedy and improv, those were two spaces where I really grew a lot in my ability to communicate and where I was able to play in a way that wasn't going to be judged. So like doing stand-up comedy or doing improv is a really great way to just like say what comes out, like first thing that pops in your mind, just say what comes out, no judgment, just let it fly and see how your partner responds and roll with it. That was a really good exercise for me. And when we're working on charging up this energy center, that means that we're probably for a certain amount of time gonna like let a bunch of stuff fly. And we're gonna do it with maybe not with as much thoughtfulness or a consciousness or a conscientiousness as we could have. And that's okay, because we're growing and we're learning. So it's almost like the first thing you get out is you gotta break the block. And you just got to speak. So you can sing, you can write music, you can create art. And it's just about charging up that energy center and getting comfortable saying and speaking and vocalizing and articulating. And then after a certain amount of time, when that gets comfortable, then you're going to do that check-in again and say, well, are all these things that I'm saying and speaking and singing or whatever, the stuff that I'm learning and listening to, is it in alignment with my higher ideals? So that's when we start to work up, the rest of the chakras. We get into the third eye and the crown. So the journey in the throat chakra, if we're really trying to learn how to use it and charge it up, is, okay, I'm really comfortable. I'm really comfortable just saying what's on my heart. I'm really comfortable saying what's on my mind. I'm really comfortable just blurting out what comes up. And so, people say I've got no filter, or I'm really direct. Cool, great. Next step. Are we able to wield that ability now in a conscious way? Are we able to now move into the space where we have a sense of what is ours to offer and what is not? Do we have a sense of when it's appropriate to be direct about the truth that we're, whatever's going on? Or are there times when it's really not our role to interject, or interfere or intervene in some way? And is what I'm saying, creating, speaking, writing, whatever, is that in alignment with how my highest ideals about the world? Is it contributing to the discourse that I want to have? Is it helping manifest the kind of dialogue and relationship that I'd like to see more often in the world? So those are questions that we ask further on down the line. But for a lot of people, the first step is just like, can I get comfortable saying what I really believe? What I really feel. No judgment, no judgment on the perspective, no judgment on where it's coming from. For you or on others, can we just be comfortable honestly saying what's there? And from there, we work on the rest of it. Does that make sense? Kiara says, people look at me like I have 10 heads because I won't involve myself in gossip. I believe it's unfair on the group individual and nobody has the right to judge. Yeah, gossip is one of those ones that I feel super strange about. And sometimes, you're caught in a spot where you're trying to hold space for somebody to like get stuff out, and that's a different thing. And I think that's where, for me, it's like I try to just opt to being a listening ear. Again, I'm not saying that there's not moments where you fall into like, oh yeah, that was crazy. But it's like, yeah, it's a good thing to be conscious of, because like what you're saying, I do think it's unfair. If it's not something you're willing to say to somebody's face, I don't necessarily know if you should say it at all. You know, because it goes to what's the intention. So that takes the throat chakra, because it's about alignment, and I was alluding to this deeper alignment that we seek once we really get comfortable speaking up and speaking our truth. I definitely feel that. It's like, well, what's my intention with saying this thing or saying these things? Where's that coming from? And that's where, if you're becoming more conscious, if it's really good, like if you got some stuff you got to get off your chest, you either go to a therapist or you open up to, parents, friends, family, or whatever, and you say, hey, I just got to get something off my chest. Can I have a moment? Can I have a safe space? No judgment, to like, just, I need to talk. I need to say this. Blah, 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 blah. And you go, oh, okay. Yeah. And so if you're that friend or that person that someone comes to, you can also offer that up and say, hey, look, it's not my place to like comment on this. I don't know who this person is. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know who they are. I don't know what's in their heart. But if you just feel like you got to get something off your chest, go ahead and I'll listen, but I'm not gonna engage any further, And again, we're not perfect in this process. We're humans, and part of relating is like solving problems together, sharing perspectives on things. That's all. So it's not about us just, shutting up and not talking to each other. But I do think, we want to use a fair amount of discernment as to, well, what's my intention here? What's my intention with these words? What do I want to do? Because when we check in with ourselves, we'll realize if we're being honest, sometimes it is to do harm or to create mistrust or to take a dig, And we have to be honest about when that stuff comes up so we don't participate in that, because I think that's fundamentally kind of like, we'll take a lot, at least people who are probably watching this, it takes us out of alignment. We're like, that's not who I am. I don't want to intentionally do harm. I don't want to sow discord. That's not what I'm trying to do. It's not what I want. So maybe I shouldn't say that, or maybe I need to reframe this or save this for a different kind of a conversation, So there's a lot of, again, these are called the higher chakras because we're talking about a different form of conscientiousness, a different form of consciousness that we allow ourselves to open up to. So it's about being more thoughtful. It's about being more intentional. It's about allowing these dimensions of ourselves to integrate with those higher ideals that we hold. I feel gossip come from high levels of insecurity. I would agree with that as well, Kiara. I agree with that as well. Because if we're secure in like who we are and what we've got going on, someone having an opposing viewpoint or a differing viewpoint isn't necessarily like all that offensive. Or somebody just kind of living their lives. A lot of times there's some projection that we can look at. It's a sign to ourselves that we're pointing out the plank or the speck in someone else's eye and forgetting the plank in our own. Deanna says, this is very difficult for me speaking my truth. I grew up, children are seen but not heard. It's something I'm working on and only share if I'm in a safe place. Yeah, that's a good thing to acknowledge, and I hope that you're finding, Deanna, like places and people to share that with. Because it is like a practice. It is about flexing the muscle, and it'll get easier as we go on. Truthfully, for me, it was really hard when I met Deanna. Deanna was at one of my first workshops that I had done live, and it was hard. It was hard for me. I had been kind of practicing, online, doing some group facilitating online, like in the Soulforce group, before I went on the road, but I was like uncomfortable, and it was the thing for me to like step out into the world and be like, so yeah, these are the things I feel, and I kind of like can talk to spirit and intuitive information comes to me. Like that was a very uncomfortable thing for me to step into. And I've had moments of this, I've really pushed myself to be much more out front or sort of comfortable in talking about things like this, sharing my true self. because I don't think anybody from my past would ever say, "Oh, Jeff's not a confident person," or he's he's quiet or timid. I was never that way, but I was definitely compartmentalized, and there was like these people saw me in this way, and these people saw me in that way, and my family saw me this way, and it's like da da da. And eventually, I was like, I gotta all those versions of me, those 17 different personalities I have. They all have to be integrated. And so different stages of my life, I have had to step into being sort of public or putting myself in uncomfortable situations. That's why I loved getting back into acting. It's why I loved taking a stab at stand-up comedy. As awful as I bombed the one night. One night was okay. The other night was terrible. Doing improv was so good for me. Stepping out into the political space, as a writing candidate one day, that was a big thing, just stepping out in public and saying, hey, these are my deepest beliefs about democracy. Now throw rocks at me and, spears at what, like, those are vulnerable situations to put yourself in. And then when it came to this stuff, it was like, this is my most heartfelt, vulnerable self. And I'm just going to open myself up for people to be like, that guy's, I don't know. Like that's the insecurity, right? Talking when you're like, I don't know if people are going to like me. So that's been my experience. Tessa said all those masks had to come off. They did. Yeah, they did. And everybody, and thank you, Deanna. I appreciate you saying that. It was such a pleasure to meet you and people like you. And it was such a cool experience. I really enjoyed it up there in Portland. And it is about taking masks off, and we're all doing it. And we're seeing that as a society. We're seeing that collectively in groups and communities. And we're seeing that as individuals. Like we're taking masks off and we're trying to get down to our authentic self. And the reality is we're all going to end up in a different place when we get there because we're all at a different point in our journey and we're all learning different lessons. And so can we get there and have an honest conversation, an honest dialogue, and just meet each other in a similar space, no matter, what perspective or background or whatever. I think that's something we're learning and working towards as a culture is we realize we're all on this ship together and we have to figure it out. We have to figure out how to do this thing together called life, this giant cruise ship that we're on with all these wacky things going on. Thanks, Deanna. I'm glad that your experience was that I offered a space where people could look inward. That's awesome. So there you have it, folks. Throat chakra. You have any questions? I'll open up the floor for a minute or two. If you guys have questions, go ahead and throw them out there. I would love to address any specific questions you might have about working with the throat chakra. One of the things we've talked about is the deconditioning thought experiment in all of the other chakras. This area is no different. We talk about sponsoring thoughts. So for those who maybe have missed some of the other stuff, brief overview of the sponsoring thought. A sponsoring thought is a fundamental idea or belief that precedes the creation of all other thoughts. It's the philosophical soil from which the seeds of our life springs and grows, which will determine how vibrant our life may potentially grow to be. So, are we doing the experiment? Yeah, we can. Why not, Tessa? Let's do it. So when it comes to your throat chakra, Deanna generously shared her experience of saying, I grew up where children are seen, not heard. That's like a fundamental belief, right? That's like a sponsoring thought. That's a root belief that then informs maybe the way Deanna moves forward in communicating with the world. So let's think about a sponsoring thought related to your communication center, related to the throat chakra. And I'm going to make one up. Well, actually, we can use this one. We can use the one that we've been using. Let's take the sponsoring thought that human beings are born in sin and that they are evil. Let's take that as a possible thought, right? That's the founding thought. If I believe that human beings are born in sin and are evil, how might that affect what I say? Or how might that affect me communicating what I'm feeling? Or my impulses, or what I feel like I have to say? If my fundamental belief is that people are bad, we're born in sin, then when I have something to offer up the world, when I have a perspective or a point of view, if that's my sponsoring thought, will that be a thought that supports me expressing myself clearly? Or will that be a sponsoring thought that suppresses how I express myself? Tessa says you would be coming from judgment. Totally. Immediately you're going to be judging what comes out of your mouth as, oh, it's probably evil. I'm not supposed to say these things. I'm not supposed to have these feelings. I'm certainly not supposed to tell anybody about them. Why? Well, because humans are bad. They're born in sin. And I'm a human. And I should probably even say this stuff. Could also work the other way. What if I say these things and a bunch of bad people do bad things to me because of what I say? This was a reality from my grandparents in Cuba who they didn't grow up in communist Cuba, but the revolution took place when they were young adults. And as they stayed there, you had an authoritarian regime in Fidel Castro's regime that literally was going around and assassinating people for being either being a part of the old Batista military or the government and the infrastructure. People were getting murdered in prison just for being associated with that past government. But then there was, when my grandparents applied to leave the country, they were basically, as they used the words, they were marked, and they got their jobs taken away. They weren't allowed to work anywhere. They lost their home. They lost their possessions. The government came and took it all, or not the Castro, the Castro regime came and repossessed it all. So there was a situation where, like, what they were saying, their beliefs, like, I don't agree with what this government is doing, got them in some pretty hot water. It threatened their lives. It took away their livelihoods, right? So there is some reality to these things, and that's going to have an impact on the throat chakra as well. So we might have a sponsoring thought that is created by an experience that, oh yeah, if I say certain things, like, bad people will come do bad things to me. That's a possibility. But when it comes to deconstructing, our conditioning, part of that is looking at, okay, where did these beliefs come from? So the one question I love to ask, you take that sponsoring thought. Why do you believe this? And what was the moment you felt certain about this judgment? It's an important question to ask. So if I'm somebody who says, oh, well, if I say something, bad people are going to do bad things to me. Okay, well, when was that a real thing? Because there's a chance that it could be real, like that it actually happened. And there's a chance that it could be just like a belief, right? Maybe it's never happened. There's no direct experience. Maybe it's just a fear. But someone told you that. So this deconditioning thought experiment is about asking those questions, getting to the bottom of it. Well, why do I believe this thing? And what was the moment I felt certain of this judgment? Well, for my grandparents, it was like, well, the day that the G2, the Cuban political police, kidnapped in their case, it would be, my grandfather, it was like his father-in-law, my grandmother's dad, when they took him and imprisoned him for being a union guy in the past that wasn't supportive of the revolution. Well, then that's when you form the belief that bad people will do bad things if you don't share the beliefs. So then you ask yourself, what has been my personal lived experience? It's not just someone else's stories, the history books, not what I've seen on the news, but my day-to-day existence. What has been your experience interacting with and relating to other human beings? And this is where we might have an experience, like my grandparents, that's very justified, right? But then we have to go to the next step and say, okay, well, are there any exceptions to this belief? Have I seen those, quote, bad people actually do good things? Have I seen those, quote, bad people leave people that have said things alone? Yes or no? Have I ever seen someone who I consider to be an ally be oppressive in some way? Yes or no? So we ask ourselves these questions not to throw ourselves into an existential crisis, but to create space in our belief system and in our convictions that may allow us to have a new experience. And in this case, in a new experience with our throat chakra. So is there a possibility I have more to learn and experience before making a broad judgment as a whole? Because that's what can happen with these beliefs. If I believe it's not safe for me to express myself. I was afraid of being judged for my beliefs. Like that was my deepest beliefs, even though I feel like they're like super positive. There was an element of me feeling judged about them, and I had reason. There were times I had shared perspectives that I felt were like thoughtful or compassionate, and people were not wanting to hear it. That feels like, oh, that's yucky. That doesn't feel good. Feel judged for like having a thought. Sorry about that. Sorry I had an idea. But should that be enough to keep me from speaking up? Well, if I believe that that's going to happen every time, and if I believe that because someone disagrees or judges me for it, that it's not worth saying, well, then I start to suppress my voice, right? So the big question, if we're going through these questions, we're asking ourselves, are we open to shedding our sponsoring thought for the sake of understanding or for the sake of having a new experience rather than perpetuating this judgment, Because if I never speak up again, I never give the opportunity for a new experience to arise, then that idea is now a self-fulfilling prophecy. That I constantly am in the world feeling like I can't speak up because I'm afraid someone's going to judge me or do something bad to me or make me, ostracize me, make me an outcast. And so I just don't say anything. But then I start to create space and distance, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then I feel less and less able, like I can speak. And the world feels more and more dangerous. And the more deeply I feel I've held on to these expressions, and the more that bothers me, the further I feel from it being a reality. Because I'm so convinced that I can't say these things, So it's it can be a very interesting cycle. But that's where working with these energy systems and charging them up in a positive way is super helpful. So maybe it's just singing karaoke for fun, singing in your car, singing in the shower, writing poetry, making your own music. And it's not for anybody else to hear. It's just because it's a way to bring energy and integrity into this chakra center, So we keep doing this deconditioning thought experiment, looking at what are the ideas and beliefs we have about self-expression, about communication, about integrity, and like walking the talk and being aligned in thought, word, and deed. We're looking at all those things, and we identify a sponsoring thought or a core belief that's actually pretty inhibiting, it's self-limiting. Then we have to ask ourselves, am I open to forming a new sponsoring thought about myself or about humanity that aligns with my ideal vision of humanity? Is there space? There's always going to be balance. When we step into this process, I feel like it's a constant effort of keeping things in balance. Because if I'm going to speak from my perspective, I'm a very idealistic person, but I'm also very practical. Sometimes I'm not practical, but my experience over the years has worn me out a little bit, and I've become much more practical. And so I hold ideals and beliefs and a higher vision way over here. Like, this is my destination. My mom had got me years ago a paperweight, and I believe it's a Thoreau quote, and it says, always shoot for the moon, because if you miss, you'll still land among the stars. And that's like a little quote that I used to see on this paperweight on my computer desk that really I think has become a bit of like my life philosophy is like, I don't care anymore if I miss, if this is what I'm striving for, this higher ideal. Because whether it's my own limitations, the limitations of a collective group that I'm collaborating with to make this life thing happen, there's always gonna be some little limitation. It feels like, at least it's been my experience. And that's okay. But you shoot for the moon because even if you miss, you're still gonna land among the stars. And it's a fun little thing to think about when we talk about our ideals, because we're constantly going to be balancing our experiences and the knowledge and the stuff we read in books with the things we actually experience in real life. And our ideals might grow out here, and so we move that direction with our thought, word, and deed. And there's some sort of pushback or resistance or a tempering of that ideal, and that teaches us something, you know? We learn something from that. And it doesn't make that intention any less important or impactful or profound. It's just the way that life sort of is this ebb and flow between striving for ideals and dreams and vision and being tempered by the world evolving too, along with us. You know, we're an individual, but we're part of a larger whole. And the larger whole has a role too. And we have, there's a symbiotic relationship between us and the world. And so we learn things from those limitations or from those boundaries that get set. And the world also, learns something from us when we push them for the betterment of humankind. So we shouldn't be afraid to do that. And there's nothing, in my opinion, more important than being honest about who and what we are, because that allows us to be in a real relationship with each other. If you don't know who I am, if I've got a bunch of masks on, or I show you one face, but you don't see the rest of me, there's a dishonesty there. There's a lack of integrity, and it's not to judge it. It's just that it's not real, right? It's not based on anything real. It's based on something that's partially real. So can we move into a relationship where we're just being honest with each other? Then we have something real to work from together, in terms of life and how we do this thing together. Because no matter who you are and how much of an individualist you are, how you might remove yourself from the world. Like sometimes I think, oh my God, it'd be so great to just like live in a cabin somewhere off away from it. Like, oh, that would be nice. I love the trees. I love nature. But then I don't have a relationship to the world. And how do I know who I am? Kiara says, we are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. I love that. Yeah, totally. I love that quote from Oscar Wilde. I don't know. I feel this area specifically about communication, listening, expression, the throat chakra is like, because it's so connected to integrity and spiritual integrity, it's such an important center because we're generally not great in this way in our culture. When I say our culture, I'm talking about in America. We're not really good about being honest. And sometimes it's because we're trying to achieve something for our own selfish gain, and sometimes it's just because we're afraid to acknowledge the ugly stuff. Because we've been raised to believe that this is such like a magical place, and as Americans, we're so special in the world. We're the shining, we're a beacon on the hill for all of the world. Like that's part of our cultural conditioning. And so in some ways it serves us because we're like kind of in this consciously oblivious world where we're like, we'll go try to do stuff no matter what people tell us. And that's push some things to like great heights, technology, revolutions of mind and technology and medicine and all these things. And then there's the negative side of it where we're like, hey, we're so busy pretending that like something real doesn't exist that we're not acknowledging the stuff that we really have to acknowledge about our shadow, or the things that we're not leading with. And so that creates culturally, that's created a bit, I think, of a lot of growth that we're going through right now. But then on an individual level, like if we want to build relationship between us and the world from an honest place, we have to take all the masks off. And we have to be willing to say who we are and what we are and all these things. And then be willing to then like negotiate and calibrate those ideas or beliefs and perspectives with other people, because, well, we're all here together. We have to do it. We're doing it together, whether we like it or not. So, little something, a little of my own perspective on things. All right, folks, I'm gonna sign off. Awakening Soul Force, a practical guide to awakening the truth within, on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. Feel free to pick up a coffee. Feel free to pick up a coffee and a copy if you'd like. I would say it's an excellent book to grab with a cup of coffee or a chai. Deanna says, value is placed on material things, not in our authenticity. Makes it hard to do that when the world around you is not. Yeah. And I'll be honest, like, it's a thing. It's been a thing. I've been really committed to trying to be my authentic self in the way that I do things. And when you're into the stuff that I'm into, which is writing and filmmaking and all kinds of stuff, you want to be able to make a living doing it, and you want to be able to do it in an authentic and like an honest way that feels good to you. And sometimes that can be challenging, because you're watching people that are like, you watch people kind of sell out, or you see people do things that are maybe out of integrity, and it gets them to a place where they can really do their, they can do what they love to do and make good money doing it. And it's not to say I'm tempted by that at all, but like, I've made hard decisions to stay true to myself. I've walked away from contracts or potential deals and stuff that just didn't feel right because it felt yucky. It felt out of alignment. It didn't feel like it was the right way to go. And yeah, like, clinging to that authenticity is something that's been kind of a journey for me personally. So it's not about throwing a pity party or anything. It's just kind of asserting that in a world, like you're saying, Deanna, where so much value is placed on material things or straight up profit. Not to digress too much, but like, I think reality TV is one of the most horrible things that's happened, because it's all the stuff that we've talked about in the throat chakra that throws you out of alignment: gossiping, condescension, lying, so not just a lying, but it's like fudging the truth a little bit, right? All those things, like, that's what reality TV is. And it just, I think I've seen an effect on our culture from that. Not going to judge it, because the reality is, maybe without all these influences, we're not going to be at where we're at today, able to look at it more clearly. But it was just like, for me, it's one of those things that always felt super out of alignment. I felt trashy watching like reality shows and stuff. And it's like, ugh, this makes me feel gross. But to bring it home, Deanna, to give us some hope, is that for those of us who want to really live in the world in an honest way, like, that becomes the bedrock of society, in my opinion. We can help create something real, and we hold space for that, for other people to step into that. And it's a place that we can build something, sort of that withstands time, if we're willing to engage with the world in that really honest way. And if we do that, and enough of us do that collectively, then we really have a shot at transforming the way we do things culturally. And it begins with each and every one of us, because we all have different likes and interests and talents and gifts, and we bring those things to the table. If we're working in corporate America, if we're working in Hollywood, if we're working in politics, if we're working in the education system, if we're working in the banks, if we're working in customer service, doesn't matter what we're doing. Even if we're just a parent, we're just like a brother or a sister or a parent, a mentor. If we're playing that role, we're providing like a solid foundation of authenticity that then relates to the rest of the world around us. So it's not just about a vocation, but just who we are being in the world. Well, then we're building something really cool. We're building something honest and authentic. And that together collectively brings sort of the throat chakra energy of the collective into balance. So I'm glad you gravitate towards it. Tessa says, people around me are changing every day without even realizing all the positive, important changes they are making. And there's that too. And that's why we just hold space for it. We just hold space for it. Because a lot of it happens in a subtle way that a lot of people may not even realize, you know? It's really cool. What's up, Tab? All right, everybody. I'm going to sign off. I want to thank everybody who made it on today for stopping in and watching. Stopping in on the throat chakra discussion. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you haven't grabbed the book, I highly recommend grabbing the book and diving into this chapter and diving into the deconditioning experiment, because this is just one of those things. That's where all the work is at, in my opinion. This is a really great space to work in to bring a depth of understanding about ourselves that can really transform and revolutionize our experience of the world and who we are and who we show up as in relationship to the world, which has its own ripple effects, which is really cool. So thanks, Deanna, for being here. Tessa, Tab, Ali was on earlier. Kiara, I know, was tuning in. So anybody who's catching this after the fact, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you, and I appreciate sharing this space with you. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to chat. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're going to talk about the third eye chakra. It's going to be some good stuff. Have a good night. See ya.